By the third night, my bank account was empty, $10,000 gone, and I knew something was wrong. I just didn't leave. That's the part that doesn't make sense. Not the money, not her, me. Because I wasn't forced, I wasn't robbed. I handed it to her, every single dollar, willingly. I saw it happening, every small decision, every moment that didn't quite sit right. I felt it, and I stayed anyway, because for 3 days, I thought she was different. I thought she loved me. What I didn't know at the time is that I wasn't even the first that week. It started on a Tuesday. I'd been in Pattaya for 4 days. No plan, no structure, just me, the heat, and a hotel room with a pool view I was barely using, and a version of myself. But to really understand what happened to me in Pattaya, you need to understand what happened to me long before I ever boarded that plane. I'm going to tell you something that most men would never say out loud. I have been married twice, 2 different women, 2 different decades, 2 different versions of me standing at an altar genuinely believing, that this time someone had chosen me. Not my bank account, not my house, not what I could provide. Me. I was wrong, both times. The first marriage lasted 6 years. We met when I was 31. I was doing well financially. I'd built a business from nothing, the kind of thing people call a success story from the outside. Nice cars, nice home, investments, doing well. She was beautiful, warm, laughed at everything I said. Looking back now, I understand that the laughing wasn't because I was funny. We divorced when I was 37. The settlement cost me more than I want to say out loud. My lawyer told me to fight it. I didn't fight it. I just wanted it to be over. I told myself that one was just the wrong person. It happens. Move on. I moved on. 4 years later, I met my second wife. And I want to be honest with you because this is the part I'm most ashamed of. I knew something was off almost from the beginning. There were signs, small things, the way her eyes changed when I mentioned money, the way certain conversations would steer almost magnetically toward what I owned and what I was worth. But I ignored it because she was there, and she was paying attention to me. And for a man like me, a man who has spent most of his adult life feeling like he is too awkward, too intense, too much of one thing and not enough of another, attention from a beautiful woman is not something you walk away from, even when you probably should. The second marriage lasted 4 years. The second settlement cost more than the first. And this time, when my lawyer told me to fight it, I sat in that office and I remember thinking, what exactly am I fighting for? Another chance to do this again? Another chance to stand in front of someone and wonder whether any of it is real? I signed the papers, I drove home, and I sat in a house that was suddenly very large and very quiet, and I thought about something that I had been avoiding thinking about for a very long time. What if it's me? What if I'm the problem? Not in the way people say it when they're deflecting. I mean genuinely. What if there is something about me, something I cannot see or fix, that makes me the kind of man women stay with for the money and leave when the money is settled? What if I am fundamentally unlovable in the way that actually counts? I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because you need to understand the exact state of mind I was in when my friend Marcus called me and said, "We're going to Thailand. You need to get out of that house. You need to breathe." And I said yes, because I had nothing else to say no for. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened in Pattaya. I am not a man who is good with women. I never have been. Even at the height of my success, even when I had every material reason to feel confident, I was the man in the room who didn't know where to put his hands, who laughed a half-second too late at jokes, who overthought every sentence before he said it and then regretted it anyway. My first wife used to say I was charmingly awkward. She meant it kindly, I think, at the beginning. By the end, she just called it awkward. I learned early in my life that the way I got women to stay was not by being magnetic or smooth or any of the things I watched other men be without even trying. The way I got women to stay was by being useful, by being generous, by making their lives easier and more comfortable than they were before me. I told myself that was love, that providing was a love language, that taking care of someone was the same thing as being wanted by them. It took 2 divorces and a very expensive lawyer to teach me that it is not the same thing at all. So when Marcus said Thailand, I said yes, but I also said yes to something else inside my own head. I told myself this trip was just about rest, about switching off, about sun and food and getting out of England for 2 weeks. But underneath that, if I'm honest, and I'm going to be honest with you tonight because that's the only way this story is worth telling, underneath that, there was a small, embarrassing, very human hope that maybe in a different place, far from everything that knew my name and my history and my failures, I might feel like a different version of myself. That maybe somewhere out there was a woman who would look at me, just me, not the house or the portfolio or the business, and find something worth staying for. I was 53 years old. I know how that sounds. I'm telling you anyway. I'd been in Pattaya for 4 days. Marcus was good company. He always has been. We'd been friends for 20 years. He knew about both marriages. He knew about the settlements. He knew about the quiet house, and the question I couldn't stop asking myself. He didn't bring any of it up. That's why he's still my friend. We ate well. We walked. We sat by the water. I started sleeping properly for the first time in months. On the 4th night, Marcus said, "There's a bar I want to show you. Rooftop. You'll like it." I wasn't really in the mood. I'm not naturally someone who enjoys crowds, or noise, or the performance of having a good time. But Marcus has a way of making things feel low stakes, and I trusted him. So I went. The bar was called something I can't even remember now. It was loud. It was bright. It was full of people who all seemed to know exactly how to stand and what to do with their faces. I ordered a drink and found a spot near the edge where I could see the city below without having to be too involved in the room behind me. That's where I always end up at parties, near the edge, watching, and that's when I saw her. She was standing near the bar, talking to a group of people, laughing at something, and when she laughed you noticed. Not because she was performing, but because it was the kind of laugh that made the whole room feel like it was in on the joke. She was young, beautiful in the way that feels slightly unreal, the kind of woman I would never, and I mean never, have approached in a million years. I looked at her the way I've looked at things my whole life that I assumed were not for me, and then she walked over to me. Not Marcus, not anyone else. Me. She introduced herself. "Knock," she said. She asked where I was from. She laughed at the way I said certain words, not cruelly, warmly, like she found it genuinely charming. And I stood there trying to remember how to be a person. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I almost excused myself, almost said I was just getting some air, almost did what I always do, retreated before anything could go wrong. But she asked me another question, and then another, and somewhere in the middle of the 3rd or 4th question, I stopped waiting for the moment she'd realize her mistake and walk away, because she didn't walk away. Within 20 minutes, it felt like we'd known each other for years. That feeling, that effortless, immediate connection, I've thought about it hundreds of times since. And I understand now what it was. I understand it was practiced. It was a skill she had developed over a very long time, applied to a very specific type of man. But that night I just thought I was lucky. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I just felt lucky. We spent the whole night together, talking, laughing. At one point we left the bar and walked down toward the water and sat there, the two of us listening to the waves. She asked me about my life. I told her more than I intended to. Not about the money, I'm not that naive, but about the loneliness of it, about feeling like I never quite fit anywhere, about the house being too big. She listened in a way people rarely listen, like what I was saying actually mattered, and before I went back to my hotel that night, she said something I should have paid a lot more attention to, but I'll get to that in a moment. The next morning she texted me before I even woke up. "Good morning, handsome. Did you sleep well?" I stared at my phone for probably longer than any grown man should stare at a text message. Then I smiled, the kind of smile you do when no one is watching and you can't really help it. Marcus knocked on my door at 9. I told him about her over breakfast. He raised his eyebrows. He said, "Just be careful." I told him I was always careful. He gave me a look that said he didn't entirely believe me. He was right not to believe me. We met for lunch, Knock and I. Then she took me to parts of the city I never would have found on my own. A local market that smelled like lemongrass and charcoal. A temple on a hill where you could see the whole city spread out below. A small restaurant with no menu where you just ate what they cooked that day. It was the best afternoon I'd had in years. And here's the thing I need you to understand, and I need you to really understand it, not just hear it. I was not a stupid man in Thailand. I was not a reckless man. I had run a business for 20 years. I had navigated complex deals, difficult people, high-stakes decisions. But there is a particular kind of vulnerability that comes from years of feeling unseen. And when someone finally looks at you, genuinely looks, or at least makes you feel like they do, every wall you've spent years building comes down faster than you ever thought possible. She didn't take advantage of my money. She took advantage of that. Now, you remember what she said the first night before I left? She said her mother was sick. She hadn't told anyone. She said she didn't want to talk about it, but that something about me made her feel safe enough to say it. I don't normally tell strangers this, she said, but I feel like you're not really a stranger. I told her I was sorry. I asked if there was anything I could do. She shook her head, smiled, changed the subject. And that was it. Or at least that's what I thought. By day 2, things had changed quickly. We were texting constantly. She'd call just to hear my voice. She called me her person. She said she had never met anyone like me, that most men she knew were loud and shallow, that I was different. I want to tell you I heard those words with some kind of caution. I didn't. I absorbed every single one. That afternoon she came to meet me with red eyes. She'd been crying. I asked her what happened. She said the hospital had called. Her mother needed medication, something specific, something expensive. The hospital couldn't provide it. They needed to buy it privately. How much? I asked. She looked down. She didn't want to ask, she said. She hated asking. $200. I didn't even hesitate. I went to the ATM around the corner and handed her the cash without a second thought. $200 to a man like me is nothing, less than nothing. It's a dinner. It's a taxi from the airport. She held my hand for a long time. She said, "You are a good man. I have never met a man like you." And I know, I'm sitting here now telling you this, I know how transparent that sounds. I know you're listening and thinking, how did he not see it? But you have to understand something. Those 8 words, "You are a good man. I have never met a man like you." I had spent the better part of 20 years waiting for someone to say them and mean them. And when she said them, everything in me that was guarded and careful and twice divorced and done with all of it just stopped working. The next day she introduced me to her cousin, a man I'd never seen before. Quiet, didn't smile, just sat across from us at the table and watched me with these flat, measuring eyes. I remember the feeling clearly. It wasn't fear. It was more like the sensation of being in a room where you don't know the rules yet. Like something was happening that I wasn't quite reading correctly. I asked Knock about him afterward. She said he was protective, family, I shouldn't worry. I filed it somewhere at the back of my mind and moved on. On the evening of day 2, Knock told me something that changed everything. She said she had a business, a small clothing shop she'd been running for 2 years. She showed me photos, the shop front, racks of clothes, customers. It looked real. It felt real. She said her supplier was pulling out, a missed payment because of the medical costs. If she didn't settle by the end of the week, she'd lose the contract, the stock, everything she'd built. She wasn't asking. She was very clear about that. She was just sharing. She said she would find another way. But then she said, I have a solution, but it involves someone I don't fully trust, and I don't want to do that. She never told me who, and by the time I found out, I understood exactly why. Day 3. My last full day before flying back. We met for coffee in the morning. She was distracted, looking at her phone, more serious than I'd seen her. I asked if she was okay. She put her phone face down, looked at me. I need to talk to you about something, she said, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything. She had spoken to her supplier. She had negotiated. If she could transfer the outstanding balance, plus a security deposit, within 48 hours, he would not only keep the contract, but extend it for 2 more years at a reduced rate. A significant deal, the kind of turnaround that would set her business up for years. She pulled out her phone, showed me a message thread, a contract summary, numbers, a business name. It looked legitimate, professionally formatted, the kind of thing that takes time to put together. She said, "I know this is too much to ask, and I'm not asking you to give me this money. I'm asking you to invest it. When this contract pays out next month, you get double back. I will put it in writing. I will sign whatever you need." She slid a piece of paper across the table. A handwritten agreement, her name, a business registration number, the amount, a repayment date, her signature. I sat there and looked at it, and the businessman in me, the part of me that had spent 20 years reading deals and people and numbers, looked at this and started calculating. Potential return, timeline, risk profile, and I thought, this is actually a good deal, but I want to tell you something else that was happening in that moment underneath the calculation. There was another voice, a quieter one, and that voice was saying, "She chose you, out of everyone in that bar. She walked over to you. She spent 3 days with you. She called you her person. She trusted you with the things she doesn't tell anyone, and now she needs help, and you can help her. And maybe, this is what it looks like when it's real, when someone actually wants you, and not just what you have. Maybe this is just what love looks like when it's honest." I transferred $8,000. She gave me a bank account number on a card. Her uncle's account, she said. The business account wasn't set up yet. She'd sort that next month. I went back to the hotel, sat on the bed, looked at the account number, looked at the signed agreement, and I sent the transfer. The notification came back almost immediately. Funds sent. I texted her. 3 heart emojis. "Dinner tonight," she said. "We'll celebrate." I showered. I put on the nicest shirt I'd packed. I sat in a restaurant at a table for 2, and I felt, for the first time, and longer than I can remember, like a man who deserved to be there. I waited an hour. She didn't come. I texted her. No reply. I called. It rang twice. Then nothing. I told myself something came up. Her mother. The supplier. Something reasonable. I waited another 40 minutes. Then I paid for the drinks I'd been nursing and went back to the bar where we met. The bartender remembered me. He'd seen us together the first night. I asked if he'd seen Knock. He looked at me, and then he looked away. "You gave her money," he said. It wasn't a question. He wiped down the bar slowly, and then he said 7 words I have replayed in my head more times than I can count. "You're not the first one, you know." He told me her real name wasn't Knock. He told me she worked that bar, had a rotation, different tourists, different nights, always the same approach. The sick mother, the struggling business, the investment with the signed agreement. He told me the man she introduced as her cousin was her boyfriend, had been for years, and the account I'd transferred $8,000 into. It was his. They worked together. He handled the money. She handled the men. I asked why he hadn't said something when he saw us together. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because men like you don't want to hear it at the beginning. I've tried before." I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. I walked back to the hotel, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the shirt I'd ironed for a dinner that was never going to happen. $10,000 gone in 72 hours. Not angry, not crying, just still. And somewhere in that stillness, a thought I didn't want to have started forming. I wasn't destroyed by the money. The thing that destroyed me was something else entirely. Something I'll tell you about. But first, I need to tell you what I found when I got home, because what I found made everything worse. When I got back to England, I did what I should have done before I ever transferred a single pound. I researched. I went through everything I remembered. The bar name, the business name on the agreement, the account number, the cousin's face. I found an expat forum, travel experiences in Southeast Asia. I searched the bar, 18 months old, a post from a man in Manchester who'd been in Pattaya on a business trip. I read the whole thing in 4 minutes. Same bar, same opening, same sick mother, same investment pitch, same signed agreement on a piece of paper pushed across a table. He lost $6,000. Below his post, 3 other men. Different years, different amounts. One lost $12,000. One lost 4. One caught it early when the business figures didn't add up. Different names. Knock, Joy, Mint, always different names. Same quiet man in the background every single time. He was the architect of it. She was the instrument. This wasn't desperation. This was a business. Structured, practiced, refined over years, and I, a man who had built a real business from nothing, who had negotiated real deals with real stakes, had walked into it and handed them everything they asked for. Now, the thing that actually destroyed me. Going through the forum, I found a man who'd reported it. Local authorities, photos, account numbers, documents. Nothing happened. Because, and this is the thing I still think about at 3 in the morning, technically I signed something. Technically I agreed to a transfer. Technically I made a choice. She didn't steal from me. She convinced me to give it away. In the eyes of the law in most places in the world, those are two completely different things. But that still wasn't the thing that broke me most. You want to know what broke me most? Going through that forum, reading those posts, looking at all those men, and recognizing myself in every single one of them. Not because we were stupid, not because we were reckless, but because every single one of us had something missing, something we were looking for, something that made us just a little too ready to believe that someone beautiful had looked across a crowded room and chosen us. She didn't choose me. She identified me. There is a difference. And learning that difference, really learning it, in the way that only losing $10,000 can teach you, is one of the most expensive and most important lessons of my life. They say he was naive, he was lonely, he was desperate. And yes, some of that is true. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but that's not the whole picture. Here's what I've come to understand. What she did had nothing to do with my intelligence and everything to do with my history. 2 marriages to women who chose my wallet over me had left something specific inside me. A belief, quiet, deep, rarely spoken, that I was the kind of man who was useful but not truly wanted. That the version of me underneath the success story wasn't quite enough on its own, and she found that belief in me within hours of meeting me, because she was trained to find it, because men who carry that particular wound are not hard to identify if you know what to look for. The slight over-explaining, the eagerness to help, the way the eyes change when someone gives them real attention, the generosity that comes not from abundance, but from the need to justify being in the room. She saw all of it, and she used all of it. The escalation was deliberate. $200 first, not to get $200, to confirm that the mechanism worked, to establish precedent. Small generosity leads to trust, leads to larger ask. That's the sequence, and it works because by the time the large ask comes, you're not just a tourist being scammed. You're a person who cares about someone, and people who care don't suddenly stop caring because the number gets bigger. The investment framing was the masterpiece because it didn't ask me to be generous. It asked me to be smart. It appealed to the part of me that had built something real and knew how to recognize a good deal. It gave my ego a way to participate. I wasn't being taken advantage of. I was making a decision. That reframe from charity to investment is the difference between a scam that works on lonely men and a scam that works on everybody. And the signed agreement, the business registration number, the contract summary, those details weren't there to make it real. They were there to make it feel like I had done my due diligence. I hadn't done my due diligence. I had done something much more dangerous. I had let hope make the decision. I posted in the forum when I got back, wrote down everything, her face, the bar, the names, the account details, the agreement format, the cousin. I don't know if it helped anyone. I'll never know if someone read it at midnight in a hotel room in Pattaya with a piece of paper in front of them and put the pen down, but I wrote it anyway, because the only thing worse than what happened to me would be letting it disappear into silence, into the particular kind of shame that keeps men from talking about the times they were taken, from admitting that they wanted something badly enough to stop seeing clearly. Most men don't tell this story. I know why. I felt all of it. The embarrassment, the stupidity, the fear of what people will think. But I also know this. The version of me who sat in that restaurant in a clean shirt, waiting for a woman he thought had chosen him, that man was not a fool. He was someone who had been through a great deal and still hadn't given up on the idea that something real was possible. That's not weakness. That's just human. And it cost me $10,000, and it taught me more than any success ever has. I've rebuilt since then, not just financially. That was never really the wound. But the other thing, the quieter thing, I've learned to sit with myself without needing someone else to confirm that I'm worth sitting with. That's not something anyone can give you. Apparently, for me, it took 2 divorces and a woman named Knock, who wasn't called Knock, to figure that out. I really was desperate to be loved. Thank you for reading. Please subscribe to the channel for more expats, life, and Asia stories